well as supplies electricity to wholesale consumers.
Con Ed Chairman and CEO John McAvoy joins us now to talk about what's ahead for the company. Thanks for stopping in. Really appreciate your time today, John. Let me ask you first about, because of all the stories that we cover on energy, there's always the demand question. Is the demand there? And obviously nationwide and globally it's a different picture, I'm sure. But what about the demand here in the Northeast region?
So what we're seeing in demand is different between electric and gas. Electric demand is basically flat in this area, and that's largely driven by the success of energy efficiency programs. For our customers, we've been providing incentives and rebates for customers for several years, $200 million over the last 5 years. And over 200,000 of our customers have taken advantage of that. The end result is we've been able to keep demand flat. That's good for our customers, good for their bills, and good for the environment. Gas is seeing an increase in usage, and that's because it's replacing fuel oil alternatives, 2, 4, and 6 oil. It's about 1,600 large buildings that will be converting in the city in this year. And that, too, very good economically because natural gas much lower than fuel oil alternatives, also good for the environment, much lower carbon.
And good for your business.
Much lower SOx, much lower NOx, less ozone, and good for our business.
Well, Con Edison really is consolidated mostly in the New York City area, northern suburbs. Ever since that acquisition you made back in 2001, do you feel, what kind of pressure do you feel to make another acquisition right now?
So we don't look at it as a pressure. We look at it as a potential opportunity. We have a financial profile that is low risk, very stable, largely predictable. We've been delivering dividend increases for 41 consecutive years, and we know that our investors value that profile. And so when we look at potential M&A opportunities, we look at ones that are good, where we'll be able to deliver value and that our investors will want to take advantage of.
You mentioned your dividend and being more of a safety play in that respect. Your dividend yield is about 80 basis points higher than your median peer group. So I'm curious as to what your interpretation of that is. Does that mean you're more high risk? Does that mean you have a slower growth profile?
No, I don't think that either of those things. I think what it means is that we've decided on a payout ratio of roughly 60 to 70% and in a continuing dividend increase, one that roughly keeps up with the rate of inflation. And that's something that our investors like that profile, and we want them to stay in step with that.
I want to ask about infrastructure, because it's been a theme that we're hearing a lot about, the crumbling infrastructure of America over these past few months and weeks. Yet we haven't had any kind of blackouts here in this incredibly dense city that I can recall since I moved back from England in 2007. How fragile is the infrastructure that you have to work with? Do you need to be upgrading that?
Yeah, so we want to keep your experience exactly as it has been. We don't use the word fragile around our energy infrastructure. We invest over $3 billion a year in our energy systems, and there's a couple of main categories. First is to reduce risk related to gas line replacement programs, risk associated with physical security and cybersecurity, and risk associated with major storms. We haven't had the latest storm of the century for a couple of years, but we haven't forgotten, and we're working to increase the resiliency of our system.
I mean, on all three fronts, it's got to be incredibly challenging here, especially in Manhattan. It's such a dense area. The network has to be, I'm sure, upgraded all the time, constantly, and then the cybersecurity risk has to be one that's growing that you pay more and more attention to.
They are. They're very substantial.
Not to mention the weather challenges.
And that's part of why we have long-term programs. We don't just try and do it in a year or two. Even our storm resiliency program, our storm hardening program, is a 4-year billion-dollar effort. That consistency allows us to not let the system get to a place where it is fragile and, in fact, keeps it strong.
Well, nevertheless, though, a National Transportation Safety Board did find Con Edison responsible for that gas explosion up in Harlem last March that wound up killing 8 people. I mean, talk about infrastructure issues, right? I mean, what kind of liability does that represent for you going forward? What kind of regulatory issue does that represent?
So the NTSB did a very comprehensive job. We don't agree with all of their conclusions, but we support all of their recommendations for improving gas safety, as well as a number of initiatives that were not mentioned as recommendations there. The NTSB has investigated investigatory authority over gas line incidents like this. The Public Service Commission has regulatory and enforcement authority. It remains to be seen how they're going to use that.
And what about liability for you guys?
So we both have a number of lawsuits and claims, and we'll be working through the legal process on all of that.
How long do you think that's going to wind up taking you?
Based on history, it's not unusual for some of those lawsuits to last several years or longer.
Is any of that money going to have an influence on your dividend or any of your free cash flow? And particularly because rates were going to be raised for you guys in 2006, and now it's pushed back to 2017.
So we maintain liability insurance to cover ourselves for incidents like this. I don't want to forecast exactly how much there is or what our liability may be, but that has worked well for us in the past.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. John McAvoy, Chairman and CEO of Con Ed.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.